I live in Colorado. I'm originally from California, from San Jose. This happened when I was 21. And what is so amazing is that I have never forgotten a single aspect of my experience. I was riding a moped, or more like a scooter, and I was going around a turn, and there was a squirrel in the middle of the road. And when I tried to turn to avoid the squirrel, it ran into the same direction I was turning. So I turned again and lost control and crashed into a tree. And I landed in such a way that I tore tendons off my hand. So I had to go in for surgery to have them reattached. Well, I had never had surgery before. I didn't know anything about it. It was the first time I was ever really in a hospital for any reason. So the day of the surgery comes around, and I'm laying there, and they start to give me the anesthesia. And as soon as that anesthesia hit my my heart had an allergic reaction to it. This is what they described to me. I had an allergic reaction, and it stopped my heart. And I was actually clinically dead for 7 minutes. Well, during that 7 minutes, something extraordinary happened that what I call now is my near death experience. And it was such an extraordinary experience that it changed my life. And even to this day, it's still changing my life. So I had my heart stopped. The very next instant, I woke up, I opened up my eyes, and I was standing in the most beautiful building I have ever seen. It was a marble building with white columns and beautiful marble. And I my very first thought was, oh my gosh, I had no idea this hospital was so large. Yeah, because I had no idea what was going on. It was a long corridor building as
Okay.
far down as you could see. On the right hand side were these beautiful, tall marble columns, just like you see in Greece or in
Hmm.
Rome. In the middle of this corridor were tables, again, beautiful white marble tables, and they had chairs or seats on each side of the table. And it went down as far as you could. It looked like it was miles. In every one of these tables were sitting two people, either two men, two women, man and a woman. They were sitting there. And I found out later that these people who were sitting there, they're called orientation counselors. My spirit guide told me this. And in fact, I should say that my spirit guide said, "My name is Alan. I'm your spirit guide." This is how it started. And then, of course, I had no idea what that meant. I just
Right.
remember him saying that. So I was listening to what he was saying, and every place he took me to, he told me what I was seeing. So he was talking to me in the left side of my on my left side, so my left ear, and on the left hand side of this corridor was probably the most interesting aspect of a lot of what I saw. Try to imagine tunnels or corridors, and all the way down they went. Next to each table on the left hand side was one of these doorways, all the way down. And my guide said, "Go look in the first door to your left." So I walked over and I looked in, and from the outside, it looks like it's just space, black space. So I looked in, and what I could see were stars and planets and galaxies. It was like looking through a telescope when you looked at these tunnels. It was the most magical experience to see this. So my guide said, "Look up to the next tunnel. So I looked up, and these tunnels were about 6 feet apart, each one of them. So these tables where the counselors were next to these tunnels. So I looked up, and a man was coming through the tunnel. He walked through when he had his right hand holding his chest. And my guide said he is crossed from a heart attack. And as he was telling me all of these things, I started to kind of get a grasp of what was really going on here. So he had died. He came through the tunnel. When he came through the tunnel, this woman stood up. She was one of the orientation counselors. And it was like they were expecting him. They knew he was coming. Somehow they know before we even know that we're going to cross. So somehow God has the ability to do that. I don't know how it works, but they know when we're coming. So she stood up, and this man was probably in his 80s or 90s. He had lived a long life on earth. So she stood up, she walked over, and she grabbed his hands in hers, and she led him back to the table, and they sat down. Well, I was a little bit far away. I could not hear what she was saying to him, but I could see that she was talking to him. And my guide said, "Watch very carefully." So I was watching him, and as she was talking to him, his physical appearance changed from that of an elderly gentleman to someone, a young man in his 30s. And for some reason, I don't know why this is, but all of us are in our 30s over there. And what was happening during this time, she was telling him that he had finished his lifetime on earth. The minute he stood up, he was in his 30s. He walked off to the right, and between these columns, all the way down, are 3 steps that you take to walk down in what they call the gardens. And they're the most beautiful gardens that I've ever seen. I can't even begin to describe what they were like. And my guide told me that when people get back from Earth, they have reunions. And everybody that had passed before this man, his family, friends, spouse, whoever it was that passed before him, is there to greet him. And they call it a reunion. So I looked over, and I could see all these people standing there. Many of them were clapping, and they were giving him hugs, because it's a big deal when somebody comes in to an earth life. And I never understood why that was, but my guide told me that this planet is the hardest of all the other planets. So not only are there other planets we can go to, but Earth is the hardest. The next thing that happens is you go to a life review, and it what he did is he showed me the outside of these buildings first, what they looked like, and then I went inside. So this building was square. This life review building was a kind of a rectangle, and again, it had those beautiful columns on it. And this building that I was in, when I got inside, there it was like a modern theater like we have today, like if you go to see a movie. But instead of there being one screen on the top, there were screens all over. And all of a sudden, when I was there, all the screens started playing, and they were showing aspects of my life. So I saw myself when I was a baby. I saw myself when I was a toddler, when I was an adolescent, when I was a teenager, when I was in school and high school, all the way up to the age I was then at age 21. And I learned that this is what they have called a life review. And this is the part that just blows my mind even today to think about it. How is it possible that our lives are recorded, but they are. Somehow, God has the ability to record our lifetimes because we want to see, we all come in for specific reasons why we're here, to learn different events. And part of the life review is to see if we learned what we came in to learn. That's one of the reasons we have a life review. The next place he took me to, it was another building, again with white marble columns, and it was a theater, kind of like the one where I did the life review. But this is a building where they take you to where you can actually see your past lifetimes. And all of a sudden, a couple of my lifetimes started playing. One was of a monk, and I was dressed in a red gown and a shaved head, and I was a monk in this monastery. And my job was to teach the young kids about philosophy. That was part of my job. Then the screen turned off and it went to another lifetime where I was a fisherman and I was in a little rickety boat and I had a net and I was casting the net off in the water. And my job in that lifetime was to help sustain the village. The third life, he only showed me 3 lifetimes. The third one was I was a shoe peddler. I had a wheelbarrow, and my job in that town was to fix people's shoes. So those lifetimes, they weren't anything exciting or dramatic. They were just ordinary lifetimes. But I was absolutely amazed that you can see them. After the past life building, he took me to another building, and this one again had marble columns, but this one was different. It wasn't a rectangle or a square, it was a circle. When I walked into the building, he showed me that there were 2 scrolls on this table. One had a blue ribbon around it, and the other one had a red ribbon around it. And I don't know why. I don't know why there was a distinction there, but there were 2 scrolls. And I walked over and I picked up the one with the blue ribbon and I took off the ribbon and I laid out the scroll on the table. And I could see that there was black writing on it and it looked like calligraphy. You know what calligraphy looks like? It's kind of like when you take that pen, you dip it into the ink and you write everything out. That's what the writing looked like. Well, when I went to look at it, all of a sudden it folded back up and I was not able to read what was on there because that was the aspects of my life in this lifetime. What did I want to learn? And the reason I couldn't read it was because if I did read it, it would somehow not be legitimate in terms of the tests that I had put in for myself. You weren't supposed to know ahead of time. My guide took me over to these bookshelves. Everywhere on the other side, there are these buildings that are just devoted to books, like libraries. The next thing he took me to from the outside, because he showed me the outside of every building first, it was an extraordinarily large planetarium. And this was the first time that I heard someone's voice that wasn't my guide. As I was in the middle of this building, there was someone behind me. He said, "Go ahead and sit down and we'll start." I didn't know what was going on, of course, so I just sat down and it went completely black. Then all of a sudden, I heard this man say, "When you look at the stars, this is what you see." And what he meant was, it wasn't just me, it was anybody who's on Earth. Well, this is what they see when they look at the stars. And he started showing our solar system, stars and planets. And the planets started showing up, like Mars, Venus, Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, Jupiter. And they all showed up on the ceiling, and I could see them all. all of a sudden, the ceiling began flooding with all kinds of different planets. They were red, blue, yellow, brown planets. And there wasn't just like our solar system where we have 9 planets. Mm-hmm. There were literally millions of planets. And he said, this guy behind me said, there is more life in the universe than you possibly know. So what I learned from that was that Earth is not the only place that we can come into a lifetime. There are millions and millions of other planets that we can go to. So the next place he took me to, it's hard to describe, but it's got like 20 or 30 stairs that you have to walk up to get to the top. Then he took me in, and it was a library. And my guide was showing me that anything you want to learn, you can come here. And this isn't the only one. There are libraries all over the place, but this one was unique. He took me to, and this is, I think, is my favorite part of my whole experience. On the left-hand side of this library, there were rooms. So my guide told me to go in and look at this room to my left. My guide said everything, this is where I first learned it. He said everything is recorded. And what these rooms are is anything that you want to learn about, whether it's the Titanic sinking or the invasion of Europe during World War II, or any event that you're interested in seeing, you can go to these rooms that are off the main library building. And somehow, I don't know how they did it, but you're able to watch anything that ever happened in history. Well, the next place, he took me to a castle. When I walked in, it was absolutely elaborate and beautiful, just like you would expect a castle to look. They're just really magnificent buildings. And there was a red carpet on the bottom. The carpet was all through the whole floor of this castle. It was beautiful. The left-hand side of the castle, if you can picture this, was full of life-size paintings. And what these paintings were, they were kings and queens and princesses and princes who lived in the castle at some point during that history. In front of the painting was a podium. And on every podium, there was a book. And it looked like an encyclopedia. And every one of these had them in front of the picture. And what it was a book about that person's life during that time period. My guide showed me 2 cats that I had had growing up. And they both died from feline cancer. Well, on the other side, nobody, or even your animals, don't have any more sickness. They're healthy and happy and young again. And I was able to see them. I didn't get a chance to play with them, but I was able to see them. And your animals, they keep them in these beautiful meadows where they play with each other. And when you cross over, you can come get your animals again. You can have them with you for the rest of eternity. I felt like crying when I was able to see my animals, because I have probably, just like all of us, dogs and cats or horses or whatever animals you had in life. When they die, they cross over also. So God has given us the ability to have our animals with us also. So that was one of the most extraordinary parts of my whole experience. Here's the last part. My guide took me to a field, and it was wildflowers, beautiful wildflowers with every kind of color you could imagine. Just absolutely beautiful. And all of a sudden, a man showed up, and it was Jesus. And he was different than everybody else. I could see his hands, I could see his feet. He was wearing sandals and he had a white robe on, but I couldn't see his face. He had so much energy and so much light that it was pouring out of him, and I couldn't see his face. But he said something to me, and it's something that I have tried to do my entire life. It was like my assignment somehow. And he said, you must tell them there is no death. And right after he said that, boom, I woke up back in the hospital room. So he actually told me, you must tell them there is no death. And ever since then, that's what I've been doing. Just telling people that something happens after we pass. And it's something absolutely beautiful. So much hope and so much joy that we forget about here. Because life can be very hard. A lot of hard times about life. And we're not supposed to remember the other side. But when you have someone who's had these experiences, it gives you hope that there's a reason for all of this. It's all real and we live for eternity, that there's really no end.